House of the Dragon starts filming in a few days and airs next year. This Game of Thrones prequel show will tell the story of the Dance of the Dragons, a Targaryen civil war that took place over 100 years before Game of Thrones. In January, HBO announced they are developing a show based on George R. R. Martin's Tales of Dunk and Egg series, which follows a legendary knight Sir Dunk the Tall and his squire, the Targaryen Prince Egg. This series is set 90 years before Game of Thrones.
I could tell you about Sir Duncan the Tall. Those were always your favourites.
Raised as Dunk in Flea Bottom, Duncan became a squire of the hedge knight Orlin of Pennytree. Duncan then travelled the Seven Kingdoms as a hedge knight himself, with the young Prince Aegon Targaryen called Egg as his squire. The early exploits of Dunk and Egg are chronicled in A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms, which collects the Hedge Knight, the Sworn Sword, and the Mystery Knight. Sir Duncan the Tall was a great knight in the history of Westeros that served loyally to House Targaryen. He was a famous warrior and a great friend and champion to King Aegon V Targaryen. He is immortalized in many songs and stories. The pair of Dunk and Egg had many famous adventures. This included a visit to Dorne, where they were nearly killed by the apparently insane Lady of Faith, as well as resolving a decades-long dispute between the houses Osgrey and Weber in the Reach. They also helped foil the Second Blackfyre Rebellion, before undertaking a lengthy journey north to visit Winterfell. Many years later, Egg ascended the Iron Throne as King Aegon V Targaryen. Sir Duncan the Tall became a member of the Kingsguard, and later its Lord Commander. Duncan was one of the heroes of the Fourth Blackfyre Rebellion. Egg and Dunk faced their last adventure together at Summerhall, on the night of the Great Fire which killed them, the same night Rhaegar Targaryen was born there. HBO is also working on a show about Robert's Rebellion, which ended a 300 years old Targaryen dynasty in Westeros, and almost ended Targaryens themselves. To everyone who watched Game of Thrones, Robert's Rebellion is quite known. Robert, Ned Stark, and Jon Arryn rebelled against the Mad King, and overthrew Targaryens. It lasted close to a year, and resulted in the end of the Targaryen dynasty in the Seven Kingdoms, and the beginning of Robert Baratheon's reign. It had 10 major battles and ultimately resulted with the victory for the rebels, the end of the Targaryen dynasty, and the start of the Baratheon dynasty. This show will bring many characters we know and love back on the screens. Ned Stark, Robert Baratheon, Tywin Lannister, Rhaegar Targaryen, and Lyanna Stark, the Mad King, etc. And if you thought this news was good enough, well, there's more. As many as 3 more new Game of Thrones prequels have been announced to be in work, or rather in a developing stage in HBO. First of the 3 new prequels is called 10,000 Ships. 10,000 Ships is a reference to the journey made by warrior Queen Princess Nymeria and the surviving members of the Rhoynars, who traveled from Essos to Dorne following their defeat by the Valyrian Freehold in the Second Spice War. She lost, but rather to submit to their rule, she led her people across the narrow sea and settled in Dorne, which her descendants would rule for generations to come. She and her people came to this new land in 10,000 ships, which Nymeria burned, preventing any of her men from wanting to go home, or somewhere else, and giving a clear sign that this strange Dornish land is their new home. But legends often claim that Nymeria commanded a fleet of 10,000 ships. Beldekar, the inside of A Song of Ice and Fire author of the history of the Rhoynish Wars, whose copy can be found in the Red Keep's library, argues that the number was inflated, perhaps by tenfold. While other chroniclers offer different numbers, in truth no count was ever made. Maester Yandel agrees that Nymeria led a great many ships, mostly rivercraft, skiffs, poleboats, trading galleys, fishing boats, rafts, and pleasure barges, crammed with women, children, and old men. Beldekar insists only 1 in 10 was seaworthy. At the time of Nymeria's arrival, Dorne was a poor land where a score of lords and petty kings quarreled over rivers, wells, and fertile water. Many viewed the Rhoynar as unwelcome invaders, who should be driven back into the sea. However, Lord Mors Martell of the Sandship saw an opportunity in the Rhoynar, and singers claim that Lord Martell also lost his heart to a beautiful princess. With many trained in warfare, the Rhoynar added their strength to Lord Martell's own. increasing his host by tenfold. Morse married Nymeria, and hundreds of his knights, squires, and bannermen wed Rhoynish women, uniting the two people by blood. The Rhoynar also brought considerable wealth with them, and their artisans and armorers' skills were more far advanced than those of their Westerosi counterparts. To celebrate these unions and to ensure that her people could not retreat to the sea again, Nymeria burned her fleet, declaring her wanderings to be at an end, although some of her people mourned the loss of their ships. Nymeria named her husband the Prince of Dorne, declaring his dominion over all of Dorne. However, such supremacy was not an easy feat, and years of war followed, called Nymeria's War. The Rhoynar and the Martells subdued one petty king after another, and no fewer than 6 kings were sent to the Wall to join the Night's Watch by Nymeria and her husband. Soon only King Yorick V Ironwood remained, the greatest of the Dornish kings. Nymeria and the Martells battled against Ironwood and his bannermen for 9 years. When her husband fell to Ironwood's sword in the Third Battle of the Boneway, Nymeria assumed sole command of the Martell armies. 2 more years of battle followed, but Nymeria eventually defeated Yorick V, and he bent the knee to her, ensuring Martell supremacy. Thereafter, Nymeria ruled from Sunspear, the new seat of House Martell built around Sandship. This migration took place around 1000 years before the events depicted in A Song of Ice and Fire novels. Arya Stark named her direwolf after Nymeria. The second new prequel is named Flea Bottom. Flea Bottom is the poorest slum district in King's Landing, a maze-like warren of narrow streets and dark alleys filled with tanneries and ale houses. It's featured many times in Game of Thrones, including when Arya Stark takes refuge there, after fleeing the Red Keep. Characters from Flea Bottom include Sir Davos Seavert, Gendry and Carl Tanner, a brother of the Night's Watch. The famous Hedge Knight, Sir Duncan the Tall, is also from Flea Bottom. The third and final new Game of Thrones prequel is called The 9 Voyages. 9 Voyages refers to the great voyages at sea made by Corlys Velaryon, known as the Sea Snake, aboard the Sea Snake ship. By the age of 37, Corlys was hailed as the greatest seafarer the Seven Kingdoms had ever known. Corlys was said to be as brilliant as he was restless, and as adventurous as he was ambitious. Corlys Velaryon, known as the Sea Snake, was a fabled Lord of the Tides, master of Driftmark, and head of House Velaryon. He was a husband of Princess Rhaenys Targaryen. During the Dance of the Dragons, he became hand to Queen Rhaenyra Targaryen. Lord Velaryon journeyed to places including Pentos, Dragonstone, and around the bottom of Westeros, as well as to Lys, Tyrosh, and Myr. He reached the fabled lands of Itai and Lang, whose wealth doubled that of House Velaryon, and him and the Ice Wolf headed north searching for passage around the top of Westeros, only to find frozen seas and icebergs as big as mountains. The show chronicles Corlys Velaryon's adventures. Interestingly, Lord Corlys will also play a big role in House of the Dragon, and this prequel will only get more interest by fans when House of the Dragon airs, and everyone falls in love with the Sea Snake character. In conclusion, HBO is working on many Game of Thrones prequel shows, and beside House of the Dragons, none of these will air before 2023 at earliest. But this is all good news, and don't worry about the release dates of these prequels. As confirmed by HBO's president, House of the Dragon will air in 2022, which is just in 1 year. Miguel Sapochnik and Ryan Condell will serve as showrunners and executive producers. George R. R. Martin will also serve as executive producer. It's based on George R. R. Martin's book Fire and Blood Volume 1, and on Martin's yet unfinished Fire and Blood Volume 2 book. The key event of the show is also the key in the history of House Targaryen, the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen Civil War, which divided the entire kingdom and launched a huge war that was fought from 129 AC to 131 AC. The Dance of the Dragons was the most devastating war in the history of the Seven Kingdoms. The War of Succession, between Aegon II and his half-sister Rhaenyra, over their father Viserys I's throne. Both of them thought they belonged on the Iron Throne. When people started declaring for one of them or the other, their fight divided the kingdoms in two. Targaryens fought Targaryens, brothers fought brothers, dragons fought dragons. By the time it was over, thousands were dead. House of the Dragon is coming, with many Targaryens and their dragons, as well as with other legendary characters such as Sea Snake, Kragan Stark and his Winter Wolves, Red Kraken and many more. Thank you so much for watching, and please let me know which prequel you're looking forward the most.